Hi everyone, Luke Wimberly Taxidermy. Today I'm going to show you how to remove the palate of an alligator's mouth and how to reinstall the palate of an alligator's mouth using the palate that I created in the last video that I shared. So let's get started. What I've done here on the palate of the mouth is I have created a lot of cuts. A cut here along the back. I want to try to leave this bone if possible because this is where the throat of the gator was. And if I decide to, if I need to put something in the bottom of his mouth and recreate his throat, I actually have a guideline of where the throat needs to go. So I'm going to try to leave this bone. It's a void back up in there once you get this palate out. But I've created a lot of relief cuts, and I'm fixing that. You'll see why I had to create a whole new palate because I'm fixing to bust this out and let you watch me do this. And I'm going to actually show you what's under here and show you what the palate's going to look like once this is out of here and why you have to replace it. Alright, the palate is out. And you can see all this junk in here. Meat, cartilage, this black stuff I was telling you about underneath the cartilage is all in there. Just really, really nasty. Alright, I got this gator here with the palate actually removed now. The gator's actually mounted, so he's nice and stiff. This is the actual palate here after I cut it out and got it cleaned up. See how jagged everything is? I've done a little preliminary work here, finished the back side of the gator for the most part. I actually have the palate here that I cut out. I've done a little preliminary work of getting it to fit. When all this stuff dries, the bones actually shrink, and there has to be a little trimming done to the palate. But you see, for the most part, that fits, but we actually have a gap underneath between the artificial palate and the actual palate that was removed. So we got to fill this in, and then we got to put this in here and actually fill in the gaps. Here's an actual finished product, which turns out pretty nice as far as detail goes whenever you get it painted up and everything, and it's pretty close back to the original deal. Alright, in order to fill this void, I use a smooth-on product called Foam 3. It's a urethane. It expands, I think, about 15 times its original size. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up about 4 ounces of solution, pour it over in here, make sure it covers the whole area. I'm going to let it foam up, and then once it foams up, I'll come back, and after it hardens up, cut everything down and get the right depth to fill in the void between the artificial palate that I made and the actual gator itself. Alright, once I get it poured in there, this is kind of it here. I'm going to run this around, make sure that it gets all the way covered. And then I'm going to let this sit, show you about how much I have in there. I'm going to actually let that sit. It's nothing to it, and it's going to foam up, and I'll cut it down once it's dry. Alright, the urethane in the gator is now foamed up. It's higher than we want, which is really and truly what we want. So what we're going to do now is take some tools and we're going to cut this down. It's going to kind of be a cut and test fit deal till we get it where we want it. But what we want to do is we want to actually get this so that it fits flush in here with the line that is already in here from where we cut the pallet out. So right now we're currently too high, but we won't be here in a few minutes. I'm going to use some knives, and then I also got a steel cut brush on here that cuts your thing really nice. It gets it the way I want it. That's about as high as I want to go right now. I'm going to use the cut brush to get the actual contour and how I want this to look. I'm going to actually switch over to a disc type that we get up in here around these edges. Once I get it where I think I want it, I'm actually going to test fit this. Actually looks pretty good. We'll get it cleaned up, get it blowed out, and see what we're actually looking like. Once I get it close, I like to take a piece of sandpaper. I got a lot of ridges in here and stuff, and you can just sand this urethane right now. Alright, I got this all cut down to the height that I think I need it. We put our pallet back in here. Once we put it in there, we can test fit and see how this line here actually meets up with the line to where we cut the pallet out. And it does that all the way around. I'm going to actually take some Bondo and glue this in here. The back of your pallet is actually smooth, so I'll rough this up with my wire brush and then Bondo this into this, and you can see here that we actually have no gap in between there, and we actually have something to adhere to. All right, when Bondoing this in here, you want to be sure to rough up the back of your pallet. Bondo doesn't stick to anything slick. And once you get your Bondo, you want to make sure all this is clear of dust. Blow it out real good. I always refer to this as buttering. You can actually just put some Bondo down in here, and you want to spread it around and get it to stick real good, because if you just leave it up to that, you see that doesn't stick. So you want to be sure to press it down in here real good. You also want to be sure to, not only do you do that side, you do this side as well. Just butter it on here real nice. Alright, now that the pallet is actually in here, secure, I got some epoxy sculpt. It's 2-part epoxy. It mixes up kind of like a putty. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to fill these gaps in. I'm going to make a smooth transition from this part of his pallet to this part, as well as all the way back here to this bone, and wrap this gator completely up, and then I'll go back and texture it and show you how that's done. Alright, I got everything roughed in with the epoxy. I'm going to go back now. I'm going to start smoothing things up. I'm going to start getting out crevices I filled in that I really didn't need to. And then I'll texture it and show you how that's done. You got to watch things like this where I'm digging out here. That's where one of these teeth go. Pay attention to detail for things like that. You don't want to fill in the teeth gaps on the bottom. The best way to smooth epoxy is a little bit of water on your hand, and it'll all smooth out seamlessly. But what I like to do is go back and smooth everything out. Make sure there's no definite lines of the real gator between the real gator and the artificial pallet. And once I know that, then I can go back and texture it from there. And now all I'm going to do, I'm going to take my little wire brush, I'll dip it in some water. I can go around these edges and just lightly tap. And this will make a bunch of little bitty holes, which is fine. That's what I want. This is not real, this texturing should not be real rough. It should be slightly rough. All I'm going to do now to knock down I'm going to take my little artist brush here and wet it. And then I'm going to come back on top of this epoxy, lightly rub. And that is going to feather edge some of them holes out of there. And it's going to give it a nice textured look, the same way the pallet actually is. You don't want to do this real hard, you just want to knock the edges off there. This way when we go back and paint everything, it's going to allow you to highlight the colors the way it needs to be. It's going to give you depth and a lot of texture. This will have to sit here and dry for several hours before I can paint it. Once you look at the texture on the epoxy now, you can't really tell on the video, but it matches pretty close to the texture that is actually on the artificial pallet cast from the original pallet. We have the pallet installed, everything's ready to go. The gator has to sit and dry for approximately 24 hours. Once that happens, then I can paint everything, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. I'll probably do that next season or something. But hopefully now you understand why the pallet must come out of the gator's mouth, how to recast the pallet, and actually how to put it back in, and see how much work's actually involved in the gator. So it's actually a pretty interesting task. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you soon. Happy hunting.